Just to introduce myself, I'm here. You don't know what I've been asked to speak about. That's the one person who's not here is Ron Geggers. And he was the one that actually twisted my arm and said, you will speak about your Australian holiday. I said, I don't want to talk about it. He said, you will. And I looked, I've been put in the line until I saw it on the website with a nice picture of me, Mr.
Yes.
I was reluctant to talk really until Ron pressured me really. Because, many of you have been to Australia anyway, and certainly one of our members has lived and worked there for quite a few years, and he's far better qualified, as I'm sure you are, to talk about Australia, all its ins and outs. I can only really give a superficial overview of somebody taking a relatively brief holiday there. Holiday snaps. Now, I went through the 300 odd pictures of the video I took while I was out there, and I enjoyed them, but I thought, there's no way you lot want to see my wife feeding a kangaroo, my wife feeding a koala bear, me looking off in the girls on Bondi Beach. You didn't want to see those pictures, did you? If you're that desperate, I'll run you past 300. But there are some wonderful photo opportunities in Australia, obviously, but they are holiday snaps, and I think they are limited in value and certainly of interest to other people other than me. When somebody like me looks at doing a holiday like this, clearly, as I say, those of you who know, Mike's been to Australia many times, people who've lived and worked there. For Jan and I, it was quite a sort of undertaking. We have over the years done New Zealand briefly. Hi, Ed. And, you want to go? Anybody else want to go? No, they had told me before. It was quite an undertaking, Jen. I said we've done New Zealand many years ago, we did China, those sort of things, but Australia was our last, we thought, big trip coming up. It's the 70s and whatnot. And quite frankly, flying for 24 hours to get somewhere is not something that appeals to me greatly. So we thought it was going to be our last sort of long haul excursion, so we were going to make something of it. From our point of view, we don't have family and friends in Australia. I know many people do, and when they go to Australia, they're able to use that as a focal point and work from there. But we don't have anybody out there. We don't have any conflicts in the family or anything like that, so we're all right. But we had to consider that obviously very carefully, and also to get the maximum out of a holiday in Australia, you're going to have to do an awful lot of travelling because clearly the country is enormous. I don't think we really appreciate the size of it. Until you actually see it, say, overlaid over Europe. It's bigger than Europe, it's enormous. And therefore, to do any justice to the country, you're going to have to do an awful lot of travelling. So the question was, how do we do that? We're obviously going to have a number of internal flights, different hotels, different locations, lots of things you want to see. Quite frankly, we thought to try and organise it from our front room in Upminster was going to be a bit stressful. So, and I'm not the sort of person, I must admit, who likes to be dumped at the airport and given a car to drive and told to get on with it. I'm a bit lazy. I like to be taken around and show what's going on. So that sort of holiday was out. So we picked over all the excursions, and there aren't that many actually that now go on tours. We only found about 3 companies which would offer the type of tour we wanted, which is about a month, travelling around and doing as much as possible. Of course, the budget too. I was a bit shaken when we had to put a budget about 15,000 together just to think about this holiday, and that made me stop and think too. And you think, gosh, you know, you're spending a lot of money, all right, and it's really thinking about. And after a lot of kicking around, we picked a tour with a group called Titan Group, which were offering something nearly a month, 6 days, and they did try to fit in as much as they could. In the one part of Australia, they don't attempt to go to Darwin, down that end of the country. It's far less popular, I think, Mike, isn't it, down that end? They're interesting places, but the main attractions were up the other end, so we stuck to that. And of course, the other thing you have to think about very carefully is when you go, because looking at the temperature charts on the old machine, it gets pretty hot there, doesn't it, Craig?
Yes.
And as we were aiming, obviously, to do the centre, which gets up to the 40s above, I think we decided to go early or in the autumn period, I guess, in Australia, which is sort of here we were going in February, March time, which actually worked out very well. So the temperatures were quite acceptable. Having decided on this and booked it and had the money extracted from me, and, you know, you sort of get stuck into this a bit. And the flight out, I say 24 hours, so you've all done it, or many of you have done it. It's a long old haul, isn't it? Most of the companies, and ours was no different, split the out the journey in one of either Singapore or whatever, Hong Kong. We actually ended up in Singapore, and I wasn't too worried about that. We spent a couple of days there, but I will say I was extremely impressed. I'm sure there are amongst you who've been to Singapore. I was extremely impressed with what I call a city-state. It was an extremely compact area, but I must admit I was, the cleanliness and the general attitude of the place was tremendous. And we ate crammed in the usual things, having raffles and having a tea and all that sort of thing. And they've got a wonderful transport system there, the underground. Really is marvellous. You can get around, and we were very impressed. We spent a couple of lovely days in Singapore, lots to see, lots to do. If you ever get the opportunity, go there. It's really just to see it, it's worth it. And from there, of course, it's quite a flight on, about 7 hours on to Australia, which we then did. Interestingly, I had a little look at the book. They gave me some time before I went. And it said Australia, 70,000, 60,000 BC, the Aborigines arrived, they say. Interesting. What happened after that? Mr. Cook arrived in 1788, the convicts arrived in 1851, and it became a federal state in 1901. So it's moved fairly quickly after the Europeans got there. And that's one of the overlying things I found when I got to Australia. It doesn't have a history, really. Not in the European sense. You go to Europe, when you travel around Europe, as we've all done, you're looking back at time, aren't you, with all the ancient cities and all that. I was impressed that nothing really is old, not in another sense we mean it. They are very proud of everything they got from the original, when they started out. But that's the thing that struck me, it's nothing really old in Australia. Nothing against it, very much. Our trip started in Melbourne. Which, of course, as we were told, was built on gold money, had nothing to do with convicts. You start talking to them about how the city developed, no convicts in it. It was built on gold money. Of course, the gold rush, which was the big thing at that time, it really built up Australia up. Melbourne developed from that point on. Those of you who've been to Melbourne, it's a great city. It really is modern, it's airy, it's huge. The street widths are incredible. We're so used to London with narrow streets and stuff. You get to Melbourne, I mean, you're looking at streets, dual carriage either way, with a damn great street down the middle with the trams run up and down. When I asked one of these careers, why did they lay it out so wide? I mean, it was laid out down here. Well, no problem there, go. It had to be wide enough to turn a 4-3 lane oxen cart round and go back the other way. That's the way they're that wide. Simple as that. They get the carts in fully laden, turn around, get out again, so the streets width was set. And that they stuck to it. It fits in very well with modern times, I must say. But Melbourne was in the throes, when we were there, of the Australian Grand Prix, which of course is held there. It was to take place a week or so after we were there. And it was nothing but cars and everywhere. Every hotel was packed with people there for that, and every hotel had a display of vehicles. It was interesting. They also had something I might mention before. They had what was called a white night. It's a whiteout situation where the city closes for 24 hours, and particularly between 7 PM and 7 AM, all roads close, entertainment, light shows, they really open the city up. And it goes right through the night. It really is quite spectacular. I've never seen so many people, thousands and thousands of people thronging all over the bridges on the river and so forth. It really was quite spectacular. And Jan and I ventured out into, not knowing the city very well, we ventured out into all these people, got lost, but it was a tremendous event. But for me, walking into the main square just off the river, in the middle of Melbourne, with these thousands of people, everything going on, sticking up in the middle was a Rotary banner, which had tickled me no end. And we fought our way over to this place, which is quite a large tent, and it was in fact being run by the what they call the Sunrise Club of Melbourne, together with a couple of their outlying clubs. And they were running really a rest centre, for want of a better name. We could go and have a cup of tea, sit down, have a chat. And we spent a very pleasant hour in there chatting to these Rotarian guys. And that's it. They stay all night and they run these things just to give people a break, really. And obviously promote Rotary, which I thought was an excellent thing. one of the things we did, I don't know if anybody's done this, we were taken to a place called Phillip Island. Mike's nodding, you've been there, I take it, Mike. That's quite an experience really, because it's a nature reserve, but we were taken there specifically to see the penguins. It sounds a bit strange, isn't it? Penguin? But it's quite an event. There's a breed of a penguin, it's actually called the fairy penguin, but due to political correctness, they've made the short penguin, I think now, rather than the fairy penguin. They're a fairy. And you're taken down, and the seafront is literally terraced out for people to sit on. Thousands of people gather just as the evening is setting in, and every night these little chaps come out of the water, hundreds of them, go up the beach, go right inland to where their burrows are. They live up in the land, and it's quite a spectacular thing. They come out in little groups, and they go under. You walk on duckballs back, and they're all going underneath back to their burrows. It's really quite a big spectacle. They make a big foliate out of it. It goes into the night quite a way, doesn't it? And they make a big spectacle. It's worth seeing because these guys, they do it. They must be paid. I mean, how else could they know to come out at the same time every night? It's that structure. You're literally told to get there at a certain time, sit down. You sit down, think, what am I sitting here for? And then all these guys start coming out of the surf. Little chaps, They line up and run up the beach and, get their hand out. It's great. It's a very, very worthwhile. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I like the fairy thing. We also did a little trip on the Puffing Billy, which is quite a renowned train, one of the trains that went up into the hills, the old gold trains, I think. And they restored part of it, and they encourage you to sit on the outside and stick your legs out the side. It's all part of it, which I did. And it's quite a trip going up in the surrounding mountains. That Adelaide, I thought, was probably the nicest city in respect to office, anyway. From there, we coached up to Adelaide. That's a 2-day trip, actually, and you travel up what's called the Ocean Road, I believe, built in the 1915, following the Great War, when the lads were all coming back from the war and they had nothing to do. So they literally built this highway, which follows the coast right up. It's fantastic. All built by hand, very little mechanical stuff, and it really is quite spectacular. And the views, obviously you stop regularly on the coast, the views are dramatic, they really are fantastic. It's really a wonderful trip up there. So we said we stopped to look at the Blue Lake, which is a huge reservoir they now use it for, but it's totally blue colour because it's in top of a volcano. They use it for the town's water supply, all that sort of thing. It really is incredible as you go up there. You have the usual stop to visit the kangaroo, photographs available, to feed the animals and to see the koala bears and whatever, camels. Camels? Do you realise how many camels there are in Australia? There are thousands of them. When Australia started out, the only way they could actually move anything round was to use camels. Horses weren't suitable because of the deserts, what have you. And of course there was so much walking about going on that they imported these from Europe together with the Afghanistan guys went out to drive. They were the blokes who looked after these things. And of course now they've let them go wild, and they really are thousands of them. They're quite a big problem. So they roam around doing an awful lot of damage up there and denying the cattle and sheep of their stuff. So it's a bit of a sore subject with them, but they're now trying to catch them and export them for meat, I understand, back to Europe, which I found quite amusing. So they're trying to make use of them. There are thousands.
You get a hump steak.
Probably, Michael. It's gristly, though. One thing we were told to do in that, which amused me somewhat, was to go across to the Army Navy store and buy a net, a head net. And I thought, this is a bit of a come on. Anyway, we did it because my wife does what she's told. They went to go and buy 2 of these shit head nets. We were told we would need them when we got into the centre of Australia. So we did all the usual wine stops as well, because that's the wine country around Adelaide. You've got all these lovely valleys where the wines are grown. And particularly one track was Jacob's Creek, where they make all their stuff. We went in there and had a very pleasant morning, trying all their wine. And I was a bit disheartened when I left, because the lady said, of course, it's all owned by the French now, you know. Anyway, so that was a bit disheartening, but the wine was good. We enjoyed that. From Alice Spring, from Adelaide, we flew up to Alice to the very centre, which is Alice Springs. You read about it, you see it, until you actually get there, it's a bit difficult. You fly for 4 hours through nothing but desert. I mean, you're flying over the desert, all you can see is desert. And you think, you get right to the middle of Australia, and there's this big city, and it is quite a big town. 30,000 people, it's quite a big, quite a big turnout. It originated, of course, because when they put the wireless, to get communication across Australia, they built the wireless right through the old Mulster, and they had to go right across Australia putting it up. And they built the wireless station there, right at the centre, which started Alice Springs, which is just right next to where the old station was. Alice Springs actually is named after the governor, who was the governor of Australia at the time that they were up there. So nothing symbolic about that, just happened to be his wife's name. So it stuck with Alice Springs. Now, I know that Mr. Davies knows a lot more about Alice Springs than I do, because he crashed landed there.
That's right, yes. 707.
I can't beat with that drama. You know, you only got a 707. Mine was a much smaller plane, but safer, I feel. But in a way, Alice Springs is quite interesting, because it was originally big, just a very small group of people. It blew up, it really became a town during the First World War. They put a railway track up there in 1927, which actually gave them access to the centre for the first time, except for having camels put up the road. They actually got through with the railway. And that really set the tone, because when the Japanese were bombing Darwin, I think it was Darwin, they were bombing Darwin, and they bombed Darwin an awful lot. I didn't know that, and you probably were that, but I didn't realise how much the Japanese, and they were very concerned about them actually invading that part of Australia. It was quite naughty at the time. They decided that they would use Alice Springs as a central point to build up their army people to resist it, because they figured if they landed in Darwin, time they got to the centre where they'd be born out. Anyway, so it suddenly grew into a huge army during the war, partly because the train was there and able to get access to it, and the numbers of people exploded. Of course, runways were laid out. Hence the runway, your 747 Lily Danville, was laid out during the war to take the transport through, and that's why it's remained a fairly large town from that time onwards. And of course, while you're there, you have to do the flying doctor service, don't you? Go and see the flying doctor's aeroplane and all that. And we did all the usual things, of course. But one thing that did strike me was the number of Aborigines. Up to that point, I don't think we'd really seen Aborigines, obviously, native people. But there were loads and loads of them. Not being unkind to them, but they're not particularly ugly people. And there were lots of them. And we said, why are there so many here? And they said, well, there's a big football match on today, this evening. They've all come into town for it, you know. There's all these Aborigines. Where do they all go? Oh, well, they just said, they're all sleeping in the dry riverbed. They literally just lie down where they are and sleep. They don't, you know, it's no concern for them. But the real problem was, when we were there, it was a Sunday, or well, no, Sunday, and you can't buy any drink over the weekend at all because of the problem with the alcohol. I think they're offended. With alcohol, they won't sell you alcohol over the weekend period in order to reach that limit. It's a bit of a struggle to get a drink at the weekend. You have to prove who you are and where you're staying, and sign away in blood. So that was quite interesting. These guys come in and they wander about. They don't seem to work, that's what it is. But it's one of those things. So from Alice Springs, we took another flight. No, we didn't take a flight. We took a coach trip to Eora, or what you would know as Alice Rock, in fact. Which is Alice Rock, which is what everybody goes to the centre to see. I mean, Alice Springs is just the springing on. But one amusing thing for me was coaching out from there, smashing typical Aussie coach driver. Gets in the coach in the morning, got a 250-mile journey to get to Alice Rock. He sets off, and there aren't too many roads there, I should say. We get on the coach, and the guy gets out, he gives us the typical Australian chat. He said, right guys, he said, we're going off now, can't be there till a certain time. He's now said, there's 2 decisions I've got to make today. 2 decisions, he said. We better get them right, he said. I've got to turn right twice. And off he goes, and this road is as straight as a die. You can see him disappearing from miles and miles into this. About 3 hours, he suddenly said, oh, I'm going to do the right turn now. So he turned right, because he gets a round of applause, he likes very music. Well, he did the second time, he didn't. So there's 2 right turns is all we did. It all took to get there. It gives you some idea of the distance. It's just a straight road with nothing. But desert, it's not really desert, it's just scrub really. But how they run the cattle station. As you drive down these roads, the guys say, oh, that's the entrance to a cattle station. It's 20 miles up there, you know. The actual house, it's 20 miles up that track, you know. How they ever keep... he was telling us a story about one guy who lived out there. He bought the ranch at a good period, and for the next 7 years it didn't rain. Had no rain whatsoever for 7 years. Of course, all his cattle died off, and he was in a bit of trouble. But his son was born during this period. When it did actually rain, he was terrified. He'd never seen rain before. He couldn't understand what was going on. You think about it, 7 years old, you've never seen rain. You know? It gives you some idea of just how dry it is, you know. But they survived somehow. Incredible. Ayers Rock, well, I can't say too much about that. I mean, you've got to go to see it really. But it's the big, built in the middle of the desert around Ayers Rock is a huge hotel complex, catering for all these rooms. And it's there for no other reason than that. You go there and you stay there. Beautiful place, swimming pool and all that. But I take you out to Ayers Rock, you're allowed to see it when the sun sets. And again, when the sun rises, I take you out at 5 o'clock in the morning, if you want to get up, and you can see the sunrise, and it really is spectacular. They show you these pictures of it lighting up as the sun comes up. Beautiful pink colour, and it really is you know, something to be seen. We had a fairly close look at Ayers Rock, but it is a sacred shrine. Now, the Aborigines do not like people going. There is a walkway over the top. You can see this rather difficult way up, and then you can walk across the top of it. There's also a number of plaques fixed to the where all the people who've died doing it, and they try to prevent people going up there. Now, you can apparently do it, but it's dissuaded. It was closed over there, and the Aborigines object strongly to anybody interfering with what is then is a very sacred shrine, as with us will be a cathedral. They don't like it being into, they don't like the Europeans touching it. So, and large areas around Ayers Rock now you cannot go into. They are reserved specifically for the Aborigines, and we were told that you would be treated with. You're not welcomed if you go into these areas, and the Aborigines make that very clear. And of course, there is this underlying feeling in Australia now that the Aborigines should be treated more fairly. They've been treated very badly over the years. So they're now given their own areas, their shrines are treated in a much more respectful way. But I'll tell you, they might get a lot of photographs there. It would be fantastic. If you ever have the opportunity of flying into them, it really is worth it. There is also another range of something very similar to Ayers Rock, which is never talked about really. It's called the Domes, which is about there's 36 domes in a series, which are higher in fact than Ayers Rock. You don't really hear too much about them, but they do take you to see them. They're not too far away from Ayers Rock, but you can actually go in amongst those, and there's water in there. It's quite interesting. It's a much bigger problem. So that really gets mentioned. I think it's because it hasn't got the dramatic effect of Ayers Rock being essentially a big red. Wonderful trip that. I would, anybody has the opportunity to go there, it really is worthwhile. And then we took another flight down to Cairns, where we spent about 5 days in and around the area, which is the holiday area. I mean, it's the one that all the Australians go to. It's where people go to in Johnson. And I say I had a fantastic time here. We stayed at a place called Palm Grove, which is about half an hour outside of Cairns itself. But it's lovely. All beautiful hotel right on the back of the beach, something out of a really out of a poster, until you actually walk to the beach. You get to the beach and there's this huge sign that says, "Do not go on the beach, certainly not at night, don't go in the water, watch out for the crocodiles, watch out for the jellyfish, mind the sharks." You think, no, I'm not going to go there. And it really is, they don't recommend you go in the sea at all. The jellyfish were very busy when we were there, and they tell us if you got stung by them, they will kill you. And the crocodiles, of course, they're very hungry. They lurk at night, apparently. If you walk on the beach at night, they get up in the trees of the beach and they come out and gotcha. So the sharks, so there's a problem, I gather, not to be. That, as a holiday resort, I mean, we went up into the rainforest once again. My good wife says to me, "Why do they call it the rainforest?" Yeah, I think she found out when we got up there. Really, you can't believe it. You're sitting in the sun down on the coast, and you get, a couple of hours later, you're up in the rainforest. My poor wife's face was a picture because when we went on this trip, they said we laid on transport to go up in the rainforest. Coach right now, This bloody four-wheel drive turns up, it's about this high off the ground, bloody back wheels, four-wheel drive. My wife shut her face out, she said, no one's supposed to get in there. We got her in, poor soul, but you really do go right into the rainforest. It's very dramatic, and they've got all these high walkways you can go around, and they show you the weather. So you get wet because it rains. Lovely, because the coach, it was pouring. When it pours, I mean, you're talking about tropical storms. You'll have experienced this, you know. And when it doesn't just rain, it pours down. And we're driving over this coach, and the water's coming in everywhere. Because they're all moaning at the driver, who eventually come out and says, "It's a leak." He said, "It's not a leak, we talked about it." He was unimpressed. But we know what a rainforest was, and it is spectacular. Also, while we were there, we went over the top. There's a thing called the Skyway, which you can actually get from there, which they take you over the top of the rainforest. You go on a cable car right over the top. It's absolutely dramatic. It takes about half an hour to get through it. It's absolutely dramatic. So you literally are above the rainforest for the whole way up the top and down the side. And you can look down. Of course, most of that is above you, because when you're down below, you go with a canopy. It's absolutely fantastic. That was what I'm very glad we did that. Something worth talking about. They called it the Sky Rail. It really was good. They've also got all the Aborigine centres there, Mosman's Gorge, all the usual things. Daintree Natural Park was on, I bet. I suppose some of you are waiting to tell me, for me to tell you about the coral reef. Yeah. I'm not going to, because I didn't see it. We were due to go out onto Barrier Reef. I'll tell this some of Barrier Reef. We were due to go out to Barrier Reef, and they caught the end of the cyclone while we were there, and it was pretty rough. But nevertheless, they said, "Oh, we're going out, we're going out." Now, it takes an hour plus to get from out to Barrier Reef. We went in a catamaran. When we got on it, and I'm no sailor. I'm not a sailor. I'm not like him. I'll get seasick watching it on television. So I thought, I'm not going to win this. Get on this catamaran, off they go. It was okay when we were in the harbour. When we got outside, these waves are going over the top of the catamaran, and I thought, this is not for me. And they came out giving out pills. Have a pill, which I did. It did make any difference. I felt anyway, I passed out. That's the long story. As I do, which was fine. I mean, I come round. But unfortunately, there was 2 American doctors on the boat who were members of the parties going on. I got on the boat. They decided to look after me, which was very nice of them. They got very worried and all that, and kept getting them to do tests and all. And I'm sitting there saying, "I'm fine, you know, I mean, I'll go over this now." No, says this American doctor. "I'm used to dealing with geriatrics," he said. Not my feeling, but used to dealing with geriatrics. He said, you can't take any chances. He said, "Get the captain of the boat." Down comes the captain, triple Australia. We're back in, you know. This chap fell over. He said, "Yeah, he might have hit his head." But I said, "No, I didn't hit him. By this time, I'm sitting there." He said, "Under no circumstances must you take this man back to or on the boat. Not, it would be, if you do that, you're exposing me, give this captain, well, I'm not taking back." Remember, I'm out in the middle of the place. So how am I going to get home then? "Oh, we'll send you by helicopter." Well, they do have helicopters out on these places where it's run people up down the Barrier Reef, see it from the side. So, that's what I'll go. Helicopter. That's got to be. All right, I said that. That's what I forgot to. I said, "I don't want to. I'm protested. I made my feelings very clear." "No, you've got to go." "Okay, can I go?" "I'm not going on there." "We can get the air back going, helicopter." The transfer from there to the actual helipad was something which was quite. So it was, if they think Carl's Army attorney, you wouldn't believe it, because I'm going to be sent from the main thing over to the helipad, which is some distance away. We'll get the workboat over to take you over. Up comes this big old boat with fuel boats on it. Take him over to the right. It's going nice. We're getting off. The poor girl who was deployed to look after me, I had to help her across on the boat. It was going, it's bad. And I get on the boat, and it's going, "You better sit down." "Well, no seat. Where you sit?" They get a white plastic chair. They put it in the middle of the deck. And it's going, And I said, I'll sit on that. Sit down. And 4 big blokes held the chair down. All this bloke. And of course we get to the helipad, boats going like this, you know. By which time this enormous helicopter came. I mean, it was enormous. Hovering up there, wouldn't land it was too rough for it to land, so they hung it up there. Down on the ropes come 2 paramedics, you know. Oh, I sit, watch all this, it's really good. They get it, they come onto the boat. Oh, yeah, you all right? You know, clip me up, things kicked all over me. Oh, I'm fine. I feel no. And they get me across onto the helipad. Get across and they go, the girl's not feeling too well, I should say. The paramedic was not looking at all well, but I was worried about it. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to get wound up in God, well, I'm the main attraction by this time, you can imagine, can't you? And they're going to reach me out into this thing. I said, I had visions of clasping this young lady and being well. I thought, yeah, well, every cloud has a silver lining. And I'm all ready for this. And she said, oh, no, you can't have that. Down goes this enormous stretcher. You're strapped into this stretcher and wound up into this helicopter. And they pin you down in there, and very uncomfortable hard land, right back to eucalyptus trees, which give off this haze of gas. And it creates quite a blue haze, which hangs over the whole mountain. It's quite spectacular as you approach it. And once you're there, there's some wonderful sights to see. We did some wonderful things, walking around cable cars and down on the old mining railways, and that. It really was fantastic. So that really was a day to remember there. And if you ever get a chance to go, it was. Coming back, quite interestingly, as you come back from the trip to Sydney, they don't try and drive you into Sydney because Sydney's got the big problem all cities have, traffic jam, nothing moves there much, so they actually bring you back in by boat and they drop you off at the old Olympic site, which I found quite interesting, and they take you around what was the old Olympic site, what, 2000? And they're all there, all the buildings are still there and well used, and being converted, a lot of stuff being converted to flats, much as we're doing up in Stratford, and very vibrant sites still to this day. And I was very impressed with all the stuff being used. It was, you know, you imagine Pearl Grease and that, but they were really making good use of it. It was nice to see it being done. And, you know, we had a fantastic time. All I can say is that was my holiday. I'm sort of boring, but I would say if you ever get the chance and you're not too old, like me now, do go along. It's a trip, but it's not cheap, but it's good. It's worth it. Thank you.
Any questions?
Questions?
Well, that was a unique description of a holiday. I don't suppose you'll find it in the pamphlets for all-inclusive, but you had all-inclusive plus. Memories which will last an awful long time.
All my
Thank you for talking to us about it. It was quite funny in parts. Some of it shouldn't have been funny, but it was. And can we just show our appreciation?